on, everyone? Thanks for joining us for another Aggie Sports Zoom Hangout. I'm Travis Brown with the Eagle. In here also is Robert Cessna of the Eagle, Alex Miller of the Eagle, and we have our special guest today to preview the big matchup against Florida this weekend. Alex, why don't you go ahead and take away introducing our guest for today?
Yeah, joining us today on the Aggie Sports Zoom Hangout, we got Matt Baker of the Tampa Bay Times. He's a college football sports writer over there. He covers Florida, Florida State, and he used to cover Jimbo when he was with the Seminoles. So Matt, familiar with the Gators and Jimbo, so perfect man to talk to this week. Thanks for coming on, Matt.
Sure, well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks, of course, Matt. As we go into this weekend and this big A&M Florida matchup, what is the biggest storylines, headlines that has your attention for this game?
Yeah, well, I mean, obviously Jimbo Fisher against the Gators is something that jumps out to me immediately because I did cover Jimbo for a good amount of his FSU career, covered a bunch of his games against the Gators. I only had the one loss against him. I'm thinking back in my head to the 2017 game, which ended up being his last game as coach of the Seminoles before he left 6 days later for Texas A&M. So that's something that's kind of in the back of my mind this week in terms of things that are actually going to, matter on the field. I'm curious how the A&M defense is going to stop Florida's offense. The Gators so far offensively, they look really, really good. I mean, the comparisons to 2019 LSU, I think to some degree those are justified. You look at the way Kyle Trask can throw the ball to different receivers, does a really good job getting them the ball in space where they can go do something with it. You look at just the amount of receivers that he has. Kyle Pitts, a tight end, potentially in the Heisman race. I think through a couple of games, he's maybe the best player in the country or on that short list. So I want to see how A&M is going to be able to kind of contain him. Then on the flip side, Florida's defense hasn't been great so far. This is a team that going in, I thought offensively would certainly be their strength, but defensively they haven't done enough. They haven't gotten enough pressure off the edges in particular. Their secondary has been a little bit banged up and depleted, but it's still not playing at a high level, certainly not up to the talent that I think it has. So those are a couple things that I'm watching. I'm going to see how Kellen Mond is able to kind of attack that defense.
Good. Let's get back to the Matt, the wide receiver matchups against A&M secondary. Alabama just burnt them time and time again deep. When you look at the stats, Florida doesn't seem to have that home run guy or home run guys like Alabama did. So is this more of a dink, or do you think they'll take more long shots with the fact that A&M had no success guarding the speedsters last week?
Yeah, I think I don't know that Florida's got they're not necessarily a stretch it vertical kind of team. Kyle Trask has so far been one of the better quarterbacks in the country. To me, one of the best stories of the last couple of years, how he went from backup quarterback at Manville to now leading a top 5 program and being a huge part of that. But arm strength is not his strength. That is not what he is best at. What he does is he is very accurate with the ball, not only getting it to the guy, but like I said, getting it to the receiver in space where that person can make a move. So that's more of his strength, and I think something that they'll do. They can stretch the field vertically some, but that's not what they need to do. Look at a guy like Kadarius Toney, one of the most interesting players in the country. Dan Mullen has said the last couple of years, when Toney gets the ball, it's going to be really exciting. It's either going to be really good or really bad, and you don't necessarily know what it is. But this year so far, we've seen Toney make a lot of strides, and not just being a kind of Percy Harvin guy where you just flip it to him, get it to him in a bunch of different ways, but starting to become an every down receiver where that's what he is. So if there was a guy that I think would be kind of able to stretch the field vertically, in that sense, Kadarius Toney would be it.
I know Trask talked a little bit in the last press conference about having some pretty deep A&M ties. What has it been like covering this guy that seemingly kind of came out of nowhere on multiple levels, and then a little bit about those A&M ties as well?
Yeah, Trask isn't the most verbose person I've ever spoken to. In terms of quarterbacks, he's definitely on the low key end. He's not going to go say something like, I guarantee you we're going to win by 50. That's not his MO. He's extremely even keeled, and I think it's a good thing for him. Again, when you look at that, his history, where he could have transferred in high school from Manville when he was stuck behind D'Eriq King. When he got to Florida, as a low or 2-star, 3-star recruit, depending on the service, and was stuck behind a bunch of guys. He could have transferred. He could have transferred last year when he was clear he wasn't going to get the job again behind Felipe Franks. But he stuck around, stayed persistent through it all, and then now here we are, and where again he could be, and by the end of the season he could be in the Heisman Trophy mix. I certainly think that's a possibility for him in terms of what his upside is and what his potential is. In terms of his Aggie ties, he said the other day, I think about half of his family, one way or another, has Texas A&M ties, went to A&M. He grew up watching them some. He was more of an NFL guy. But the biggest thing, I didn't know this at least, is Kyle Trask is named after Kyle Field because he had so many Aggies in his family. Didn't go to the only A&M game he remembers going to was a spring game in Johnny Manziel's final year, but certainly he knows that about A&M's history, and he also knows that A&M was among the schools that chose not to recruit him when he was the backup at Manville. So that'll be a little chip on his shoulder, just like it is pretty much every team, honestly.
Looking at everybody always looks at the big picture in college football. It's 1 week at a time. So with that in mind what would, I guess, a win for Florida puts them in line for, college football playoff, New Year's Six Bowl. You can touch to that, but what would a loss do to Florida Saturday?
Well, let's start with the win. Like you said, this is a Gators team that I think has legitimate college football playoff potential. You look at just the weirdness of this godforsaken year. I think it's going to favor a team that has stability at quarterback, that has stability at offensive line, that has stability in the coaching staff. And that's the Gators. So that's why I think right now, if I had to pick, I think I would pick them to win the East over Georgia, even though Georgia, top to bottom, has more talent. So this to me would be, again, give Florida credit. They beat Ole Miss, they beat South Carolina, but that's a team, a first-year head coach in his first game in Lane Kiffin, and a coach in Will Muschamp, who in a normal non-pandemic year would be on the hot seat right now at South Carolina. This is different. This is a national championship coach in a program that's recruited at a pretty darn high level the last couple of years. So to me, this would be, if they win, it's a sign that they're making strides in the right direction, and that this is a team that, again, like I've said, I think has playoff contention. A loss would be, it would be tough for the Gators to swallow because I think they are the better team. And it wouldn't necessarily devastate their chances in the East. But when you look at, Georgia still has to play Bama. Obviously, November 7th, the outdoor cocktail party in Jacksonville, the winner of that probably going to win the East no matter what happens here coming up. But this would be a major dent in their chances in terms of the playoff because who knows what the heck is going to shake out like the rest of the year.
I know you have been down there and covered, I believe I heard you were covering down there when Jimbo Fisher was down there at Florida State. Lots of good battles between Florida State and Florida. What do you remember about that rivalry and about Jimbo playing against Florida?
Most of the games were not very compelling. Most of them weren't very good. 2012 was the only time that Jimbo lost. That was at least a somewhat entertaining game when the Gators were pretty strong that year. Next year, honestly, the two games that jump out to me the most with Jimbo against the Gators were 13 and 17. The 2013 game, Florida was in a lost season at the end of near the end of Muschamp. And Florida State was on their way to the national championship. I have vivid memories. I can still see it in my mind's eye, the way Kelvin Benjamin was just running down the field all over the Gators. The Gators had a good secondary, a lot of NFL guys, and their first round receiver for FSU just kept running all over these defenders, had 180, 200 yards receiving. Obviously, Jameis had a really good game. That team ended up winning the national title. And then on the flip side, that's the high. The low was the 2017 game, where that was one of the most meaningless Florida State games they've had since Spurrier helped make the Gators a really, really good program. It was just a bad game. Both teams were not very good. Florida was on a lame duck interim coach, Randy Shannon. Jimbo was on his way out the door to College Station. And both teams played pretty poorly. The microcosm I could give you of the end of the Jimbo era is this one play. Matthew Thomas, 5-star linebacker for Florida State. I think it was a fumble, if I remember right. He's on his way into the end zone for a scoop and score, again, in this bad game in a lost season. And he's showboating on his way in. trips and falls down at the 1. And then, so not only does he not scoop and score and get the touchdown, but he gets flagged for a 15-yard penalty for celebrating a touchdown he did not score. And if I could summarize the end of the Jimbo era and kind of how things were going there in terms of, looking at that season and also what has happened since then, that's one of the plays I turn to. Matthew Thomas getting flagged for celebrating a touchdown he did not score.
Okay, this is a big game for both coaches. Since you covered both of them, what are the similarities between Mullen and Jimbo, and what are the things they're totally different at?
That's a really good question. They're both intense guys. Mullen, I think, by and large, is a little more, comes across a little bit softer, I think, than Jimbo. Jimbo usually was pretty good with the media. I would say by and large, he definitely is a schmoozer. Mullen a little bit less so. Both offensive guys. I think Mullen is more cutting edge, if that makes sense. Jimbo's had a tremendous amount of success. I'm not taking that away, but he seemed more set in his ways. This is my system. This is what we do. Whereas Mullen, I think, has done a good job adjusting. You look at his offenses over the years, going back to certainly when he was at Florida as an assistant, they'd go from zone read to, and we got a good quarterback, powerful quarterback, Tim Tebow, to kind of more inside and inverted veer zone read. And then when they had really good playmakers on the outside, do more flip it to those guys. Last year, the strength of the team was 4 receivers who are now in the NFL. Spread it around to those guys. This year, Kyle Pitts is an unstoppable, so far at least, tight end. So they find ways to get him the ball and get the matchups advantageous to that guy. So I think Mullen does a little bit better job kind of adjusting what he does to his personnel. And I think Mullen, Jimbo, again, an excellent coach. I'm not taking anything away from that. But if you're giving me X's and O's, Jimbo against Mullen, all players being equal, who's going to win? I'm going to take Dan Mullen. I think he's established himself over his career, what he did at Mississippi State with inferior talent, as one of the best couple play callers in the country. And I still think that's true.
I know we mentioned Kyle Trask, A&M secondary, Mon, Florida's defense. What's the matchup that grabs your attention the most as you head into this game?
I think it's probably whoever is going to try and defend Kyle Pitts for A&M. Kyle Pitts against whoever. Go back to if you want to watch a really interesting just player-on-player matchup, look at what Kyle Pitts did against Ole Miss. I went back and rewatched that game. It was remarkable. There were times when he would kind of block or fake to block, an edge rusher would slip out and catch a pass. He schooled their star kind of nickel back hybrid position. He schooled that guy a couple times. He would school a cornerback in one-on-one coverage. He would run past linebackers on the one streaking touchdown that he had. That was 60 yards, if I remember right. And then on his last touchdown, he leapt over 2 different safeties to come down with it. So to recap, Kyle Pitts was guarded by an edge rusher, inside linebacker, star, cornerback, safeties, and beat all of them. So to me, that's extremely impressive. So I don't know how the Aggies are going to try to defend him, but they're going to have to figure something out. Otherwise, it's going to be more couple touchdowns for Kyle Pitts and him, and keeping himself in the conversation as one of the best couple players in the country.
So has Trask had any bad game or bad games thus far since he's taken over for Franks?
Nothing really jumps to my mind. Maybe Georgia, I'd have to kind of go back and check. But he's been very, very steady. He's not athletically, he's not a wow guy. Felipe Franks could throw it a mile. You look at the touchdown, the bomb he had to Tyree Cleveland to beat Tennessee a few years back. He has an NFL caliber arm, an elite arm, Felipe Franks did. But what Franks couldn't do is read the field right, make the right move, or make the right read and get it to a guy when he needed to. That was Felipe Franks' downfall. And that's why he's no longer the quarterback at the Gators, and he's at Arkansas. And Trask, I think, is the opposite, where he always seems to make the right decision. He's very quick in how he processes things. He gets the ball out quickly. He's not the best runner, but Dan Mullen's offense doesn't need a Tim Tebow guy. What it needs is a willing runner, is what Mullen has said repeatedly. And Trask is willing enough. He picked up a first down the other day. I think it was on 2nd and 15. Didn't have much going. went out, got 19 yards around the right side. So there's no real bad game that jumps out in my mind. I'm sure I'm missing something, but he always seems very, very steady and even keeled.
How has Florida adjusted to COVID protocols and gone through the season and the fall camp, getting back from the COVID break?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like every program in the country, they've had pauses. I think they had, give the Gators credit here because they are making some of this information public in terms of how many tests they've given in the athletic department, how many players have been positive, and then breaking that down with football specifically. We just learned today they've had another positive here this month, and I think it was 10 in September, if I remember right. They did, there was some early on in July, did well in August and in early September, and then kind of mid to late September, there were more as students started getting back. And again, I like I said earlier, I think as a general kind of big picture here, the Gators have been a program that because they've been so stable, they missed all of spring practice, but they could handle that because Dan Mullen's offense isn't a whole lot different. We were talking to Stuart Reese, one of their starting offensive linemen. Stewart joined the Gators this year as a grad transfer from Mississippi State because he signed at Mississippi State to play for Mullen. Then comes and plays for him at Florida. He said the offense is 98% the same, what they did at State and what they're doing now with the Gators, just a couple little tweaks here and there. So that just kind of shows the continuity. It's not like Florida State where they have a whole new coaching staff that the players had to get to know. It's not like Miami where they had the grad transfer quarterback De'Aaron King, Brett Lashley, the new offensive coordinator, trying to change all those things quickly. The Gators they knew who they had, pretty much the same personnel. So there weren't a whole lot of hiccups there from the kind of X's and O's schematic football perspective there during the layoff.
Cease, Alex, y'all got anything else?
I guess I just got to ask.
What do you think about?
Go ahead, Cease.
I was going to say is, what about playing on the road, 11 a.m. under COVID situations? Does Florida catch a break there, or do you feel that A&M does have a definite home advantage at 11 o'clock on a Saturday?
Florida's first game was 11 o'clock at Ole Miss, so that's kind of a wash. They played it at the noon local time for the last game as well. So it's the third straight noon game. That's kind of a wash. I think they catch a break in some ways that College Station Kyle Field is not going to be what it usually is because of the circumstances. So that's a break that the Gators catch because obviously Kyle Field, one of the biggest stadiums in the country, one of the loudest fan bases in the country. So I think in that way it's kind of a wash. But I mean, you guys tell me. I haven't been to Kyle Field. How weird is it now in this era?
It's not the same pageantry. A&M's known for having its halftime performance with the band. That's not a thing anymore. Limited capacity. I mean, it's the same all around, but you can definitely tell it's a lot different, for sure.
Yeah, I've covered games now at 3 different stadiums, 3 different fan bases in this weird thing, and they felt like spring games. Or like the first Florida State Georgia Tech game I did was that was a sleepy noon ACC bad kickoff is what it felt like. I really noticed it Florida State Miami because Florida State Miami, no matter how bad the teams are, that buzzes. And Hard Rock Stadium at a game of that level is supposed to be awesome, and it was flat. And that's when I really noticed it. And the Swamp the other day it was weird. It wasn't bad. It felt like a Florida versus Florida Atlantic kind of sleepy matchup. And again, I think as the season goes on and the stakes raised, we'll notice that even more.
Yeah, I think A&M's done a pretty decent job at maintaining some level of atmosphere and some level of everything going on. So it felt like an in-between between a spring. It didn't feel quite like a spring game, but it didn't feel quite like a normal game to me. Cease, what do you think?
Alex, you got any questions for your buddy before you let him go?
I guess we lost Cease. Oh, anyway, well, Matt, thanks so much for giving us a few minutes of your time. Where's a place that everyone can find your work and get a hold of you?
Of course, yeah. Our website is tampabay.com. I'll have something kind of looking back at that 2017 weirdness of Jimbo's last game before he joined the Aggies, and how that was a turning point for the Gators, the Noles, and Jimbo. And I'm on Twitter at mbakertbtimes.
Perfect, Matt. Well, thank you so much for giving us a few minutes of your time. Everyone be sure to check out his work leading up to the game, and we'll be back next week with another Aggie Sports Zoom Hangout.